Now, with a little delay, it is my pleasure to welcome you to our first speaker on the studio stage. And we, probably you also know him already. David Spiola is a Neos team member, and he has been for quite a lot of years. And he has given some of the, well, for me at least, more inspiring and forward-looking talks on this stage. So today, David will talk about headless and why you should use your head before going headless and which content publishing strategies work with Neos. So thank you very much for being here today, David, and the stage is yours.
Ah, wow, quite a crowd. So I think I touched some nerve here. So I didn't expect so much people actually. Yeah, welcome to my talk. I actually wanna pick up where Robert left me. He left me some pieces in the keynote speech because a lot of things we are going to talk about today about complexity and how we can reduce it and how can we manage it. So I would like to start with a conversation I had a few years back with one of my former colleagues. So I basically asked him, how are you doing? And he said, yeah, it's totally awesome because I'm still failing on an even higher level. So he was very proud, and I'm also very proud when when there's not something new coming around and you can play around with it and it's so much fun and you just like it. But it could lead to a question that is very, very popular in the CMS ecosystem, and this is headless. So my main topic of today is use your head before you go headless. This is actually my daughter. She did that costume herself a few years back. And it's basically, she's just this high. And I asked her, I have full consent for this picture. I hope it's okay for you. Yeah, okay, so I'm already old. So when I started building websites was actually quite easy. I mean, at the start, we just had 3 different technologies. We had HTML, JavaScript, and CSS. And this was basically it. So the browser supported all of those 3 technologies, and it was basically just client-side rendering. It was super simple at the time. There was just one big drawback, and that was browser support. So if that would have been better in the early days, we might have gone a different path until now. But who knows? Yeah, of course, we had to address concerns and things got more complicated, so we introduced a second block into our stack, if you so will, for server-side rendering. And we used technologies like PHP, Apache, or MySQL for it. So it was still okayish, very simple. You could almost every use case was possible at the time. And we had some and we did some separation of concerns. So we started to think about, okay, let's do things on the client and let's do things on the server. But in the meanwhile, something happened. Technology and new accomplishments and new browser stuff and so many things. Actually, you're seeing the wrong slide, actually. What is happening? Oh, here we go. Sorry. It's moving around without it. I don't touch it, and it's... motion control. Oh. I have a different one, actually. Maybe that one works. Once again. Ja, steck mal an. Okay. right. All right. All right. So this is the slide. So in the last 20 years, when I started web development, a lot of things have changed, and we have so many technology building blocks, if you so will, we have to address, we have to take care of them, and this is also somehow related to the keynote from Robert, where you have to manage the complexity. But one more thing, what actually things got way more complex on one hand, but browser support is awesome now, so that's actually quite good. That's a very good development. But we as web developers often forget there are many other developer ecosystems or context zones or quality zones around. So we couldn't make web development without browser development or without hardware development. We couldn't deliver a website without internet carriers, and so on and so on. And this actually leads to a very, very big pile of shiny blocks. So many things, so many concerns we have to address, and they are so shiny, it's sometimes like Christmas. There is something new coming along, and you just say, I want to unwrap it. It's like, you know, being a 5-year-old boy waiting for months until I can finally unwrap. It's released, alpha, beta, whatever. I just want to get my hands on it and work with it. Yeah, so at some point, when things went, from my point of view, terribly wrong. And before we go into that, I would like to briefly talk about the foundation we are building on. And the analogy I have in my mind all the time when I talk about this is Earth, because when you go to the lower layers of the technology stack we are using today, it's very stable. If there are any changes at all, just a few changes in decades, if you will, you know, to the TCP layer didn't change at all. HTTP evolved 2 times in 30 years. You know, it's not that you have a new release every week around the corner. And if you move up the stack, you get on higher levels, you get higher abstraction, but you also gain flexibility. Flexibility in a sense of that you have more developers around who understand the technology, or you have, like with JavaScript, you have browser support that you don't have with other languages, except assembly or WebAssembly. We will talk about that a bit later, just a little bit. And you somewhere have your pointer, laser pointer? No. In any of those layers, maybe not in the lowest one, but in the layers above, you start building your business logic, your problem. You want to solve a problem. And you always have to determine or decide in which layer you want to put your problem. Where is it suited good? Where is it flexible enough? Where do I have enough developers? Is it stable enough? Is it a long-running process? Is it a short-running process? Many, many concerns. So you could move up, or this is what we usually do, that we try to find some layer or technology, some more abstraction in order to get things done. Or you could also go down. I mean, it's totally okay to go a layer down and do things there, but it's way more complicated, or let's say at least the ecosystem is not so great and it's a little bit harder to learn. So it might be a challenge, but at the end it might be something that works for years without touching it at all. Okay, so why did get things so complex for web developers? First, we love shiny blocks and we love bullshit bingo. So whenever there is a new buzzword on some blog post about new technology, half of the crowd in this room probably is already talking about it. It's crazy. We like it. It's like unwrapping presents. The second, the second thing is that I would say that the browser got somehow hijacked, because in the early day, the internet was just about delivering information. But at some point in time, big tech companies came in and started to use it as an application infrastructure. So they saw the opportunity that, hey, I don't have to write my UI in Windows and ship it to every customer because the customer already has a browser installed, and I just leverage that technology in order to deliver faster and better. This led to some conversation, or let's see, a path that maybe is. I would argue it was splitting in two different concerns. One was rendering content, delivering information, and the other one is about application development. A good example for that might be the Neos UI. For that, you need a front-end framework, and you need all those new shiny technology blocks in order to get it done. But I think this is a good example. Wikipedia and Facebook are two totally different things. I mean, they don't have. The only thing they have in common is that they are in the browser, basically it. And the browser and the entire ecosystem had to get better and better to supporting use cases like social networks for big companies and so on. Okay, another concern that emerged over the years is security. So there is more users, more business logic, more customers. We had to address security seriously. And I always like to say that security is the natural enemy of productivity. You know, you can make the best software in the world. If the login doesn't work because the client forgot his password, it's what this crappy software, I can use it. Then performance is an economic multiplier. So even in that regard, the big tech companies told us how we should build websites and how should they perform in order to be able to compete within the market they created themselves. So this is what I mean, that the browser got somehow hijacked in that regard. So that leads to a lot of concerns we have to take care of. So many different things. When I started development, you could do it with one person or 3 persons. Now you need 10, you know, if you're lucky to address all of those words on the slide. Okay, let's talk about the head in the room. What, at least for me, what does headless actually mean? Headless basically means that you delegate responsibility to another system or technology. That's it. The rest is marketing, wording, some shaping, some context. But at the end, you have a problem, and at a certain point you realize, I can do it alone, I need help. And this is where this word headless, decoupled, and so on start to emerge in our web development community. So the question is it necessary? And the most famous answer in web development is it depends. So let's play a bit buzzword bingo, not bullshit bingo. Yeah. Okay, so headless, decoupled, two-stack hybrid, content provider, microservices, very fancy. And all of those things basically address the issue I told earlier, that you try to move business logic into other technologies or systems. And it doesn't matter if you call it headless or decoupled or two-stack. There might be some variation to it, but it basically means the same. The last one, microservices, is a bit different, and we will get into that a bit later. So, in Neos, we trust as a building block, at least, when we build websites. And the question is, why should we trust? And I would argue because we trust in APIs. Because this is the only thing that really matters, is how your blocks communicate with each other and not how you name them or whatever. It's really about the connectivity of functionality and how you can. Sometimes you want to have things together. Sometimes you want to have them. You need to have them apart. And this is basically what APIs are doing for you. So You could say very simple, you have a Neos and then you have a REST API talking to a Svelte application or whatsoever, or you have another API that is, in this case, is talking to Mautic. That's a marketing automation tool we are also using, and nothing new or shiny here. But what we never talk about is all those building blocks and APIs we already have within in the Neo system, and how much we can already accomplish there without the need of introducing new technology. I don't want to say that Neos can do everything, but it can probably do more than some people at least think or realize. So on some level, we have the flow framework and the event sourcing. What basically Flow is a PHP framework that is the foundation for Neos itself. We have some very cool things like aspect-oriented programming or architecture for extensibility. That basically means that you can use every function in the system and override it or replace it or do something before, after. It's an awesome hook system, so to speak. We have an event sourcing framework now that also helps a lot for stability when it's about APIs. In some cases, if it's really necessary to make sure the API really acknowledged what I sent to it and repeat it if it doesn't. And one more thing I really like about it is the multiple authentication providers. So in Neos, you can say, okay, I have an API for this and for that, and there are two different concerns. They shouldn't even know from each other, so to speak. So I could easily isolate that security context and use one security context just for one API and another context for the other API. Very powerful. Then we have the content repository. What actually gives you the possibility to define content like data via node types. So you can define schemas. I mean, on some point, you could also say it's like domain-driven design where you design some models and this is more work involved. With the content repository, you can use your data and structure it. So it doesn't have to be necessarily about websites. You could also make a product catalog, for instance. There is another very cool thing that's flow query. So this helps you to go through all your data, find your data, retrieve your data, and so on. And this is also very cool because there is also an API involved that abstracts all the PHP logic. So when there is an update ahead, a PHP update or a Neos update, you have to be concerned of all. You don't have to be concerned about it because it's handled for you. And then, as we already heard in the keynote presentation today, the event source content repository will be a big leap forward in terms of stability, scalability, and things like that. And I personally believe that this will be very important in the future and can't wait to get my hands on it. Okay, then we have dimensions. Also an internal API, if you so will, where you can use your content in different ways. So you could say, I need dimensions for language or for markets or a combination of those things. But you can also use it for customer experience management. So you could define dimensions, I don't know, let's say tier 1, 2, and 3, and depending on your login status, you serve different content. So you can also here use a lot of power already within the system to ship somewhere else if you need to. And last but not least, Fusion. Fusion is very, very interesting because when I talk to colleagues and we talk about templating engines, especially in the PHP world, there is some kind of misunderstanding here when I'm talking about it, because Fusion is more like, or AFX is more like JSX. So you could basically compare Fusion with ASX. You can compare it more to how React works in a way than Smarty works or Twig works. So Twig is basically just string manipulation. With Fusion, you have the complete rendering tree structured in objects, and you can access them at any time. So every tag, every property, every piece of string is accessible and changeable within the rendering process. And that's very powerful. And I think this is mostly misunderstood, that it's not another templating engine, because with that amount of control, you are truly free to build whatever you want. It is an abstraction for PHP as well. So frankly speaking, if you don't know PHP at all, and somebody does the basic setup for you, you can only use Fusion to build a website. You don't have to go down into the PHP layer to do things. This is also something I really like. Yeah, full control of the rendering tree, planned extensibility. You get a caching framework for it to cache all your pieces you need. And also a use case I used a few times in the past is you can use Fusion to create public APIs for REST and GraphQL. And how does that look like? So in Fusion, I don't have a laser pointer here now. In Fusion, you have something called a data structure. So you could create a nested representation of a JSON object within Fusion and use that representation to serve via GraphQL or REST to some external service. And this is actually quite easy. So you might have some logic already implemented in Fusion. You basically make a data structure, then you have product details, and you already have a product API Fusion integration component, and then you just take the identifier, you get the image from the repository, and then you feed it back to whatever picks up. And what does pick up? That's basically a PHP function in this case, where you can create a Fusion view within PHP, where you can actually render everything as a string. And then at the bottom, we assign it to a MVC controller. And at the end, we have some, I don't know, GraphQL endpoint where this is the wrong slide, isn't it? 1 second. No, sorry. Yeah, so this is the highest level on this case. So what I did in this case, I created a middleware within the middleware chain. That middleware chain is going to a function called getProducts. And here I call flow query to get my product data. And then I iterate all of those nodes. I get all the details from my Fusion layer, and I feed it back to the client. So very, very powerful in that regard. Because one thing I frequently heard in the last few years is, why don't we have an official content repository API? And yeah, that would be nice, but it also sometimes feels like it would be a step back, because you already can tailor your application. I see heads moving back there. But this is just, one of many thoughts about it. You can basically tailor everything quite quickly to the needs you have, yeah? And this is quite powerful. So we have the flow framework, we have the content repository, we have the dimension system, and we have flow and AFX. And now we will go quickly through some very simple use cases. So the simplest one would be a marketing website. You basically just use Neos and a bit of JavaScript, CSS, and HTML. No framework at all, it would work. You can use it. Render website, all good, no problem. Secondly, you could also add another technology called HTML over the wire, or HTMX. And I would like to point to Dominique's talk a bit later today, where he will talk about it. Very good technology. And the basic idea is that you have just a thin layer for the front end for making reactivity possible without having a big front end framework. And you could also add some other technologies like Tailwind or whatsoever, still very simple and usable. Okay, so let's move the marketing website to the left side. And we still have Neos, but in this case, we want to render a newsletter. Also a very good use case, because who of you knows MGML? Ever heard about it? Okay, very good. MGML is basically an abstraction for newsletter templating. So you could use Neos, where you have all your content and all your settings and all your assets and everything, and create a MGML template that will be rendered as a newsletter and send it via a third-party system. In this case, again, it's Mautic, where you take that freshly produced template, you feed it via API to Mautic, and Mautic will take care of sending it out to the world. Yeah, you also might have customer data management somewhere in place where you collect data from your customers that you might feed back to Neos with an API again. And then you can later use on the marketing website to support customer experience management. As I told earlier, you can use that information to use a different dimension in order to show different content or make personalization in general. Okay, let's also move that aside and add something additionally. So you could also make a standard or whatever fits your purpose, REST, GraphQL, API, whatever you need. And you can feed that to any application. Yeah. So again, in this case, you might also, oh, there is an error wrong actually. You might have an external authentication provider, and again, Neos provides all the necessary packages and building blocks to support such a use case. Another use case I used twice in the past is a product catalog. So what we basically did is that we had Neos, and Neos was getting information from other systems like databases or product ERP systems or PIM systems where you have a product number and some product information where a product manager is taking care of the product. Then you get this information via API into Neos, and then you add all your marketing material, like let's say you have a different image for a different market or for a different language or whatsoever. So you basically enrich that information you get, and then you can again feed it out to, in this case, it was a view application. And last but not least, microservices. Microservices is a topic for its own, I would say, because the promise of microservices has a big catch. And my personal opinion on that is that it adds, it adds a lot of complexity, because in a system of microservices, imagine end-to-end tests. How many building blocks you have to test, how many things have to go right, how many things you have to update and manage and take care of. And I don't want to say that this is not a use case we also use for our customers, but you have to really be careful because it adds a lot of complexity and thereby cost and manpower. But again, we have a talk about this later today, I guess, where what you shouldn't miss, because I think it's a very cool use case of what you can do and what a role Neos can play in a microservice architecture. So there is always this discussion about a monolith versus microservices. And this is, for me, a discussion in the wrong context, because you could argue that Earth is a monolith, and we are very happy about it. And a few billion microservices are running around, so if you so will. So it's basically a matter of context, or a matter of where is your center of gravity when you design a system, and which other systems have weaker or even stronger gravity points, like the sun, for instance. I mean, we go around the sun because it has a bigger gravity impact than Earth. So if you use microservices, complexity and cost will always go up, and be very, very careful with that. And this is why I created the talk in the first place, because Headless emphasizes microservices. And it sounds like a catchy buzzword that solves all your problems, but you have to know that you get a lot of new problems as well. So what is important? Sometimes it's better to keep things together. Sometimes it's better to keep them apart. Final. So, secondly, simplicity rules always. Try to solve your problem with as less building blocks as possible, because reducing blocks means reducing complexity, reducing maintenance, and leading up to faster software delivery or release management or whatsoever. There is the state management dilemma with client and server, and this is also something where, I don't know, there's also some discussion going on about client and server and so on, but basically there is only one real factor in my point of view, and this is compute power. So your clients or your customers with their computers will always have more processing power than you have on your servers. But when you harness that power, you always add complexity again, because you might have a state on the client and a state on the server that might not be in sync. And then you have to manage all those state stuff back and forth until you find out, oh no, was it really a good idea? I don't want to say don't do it, I just want to say consider it. So there are those who say, let's do everything on the server, we don't need the client at all, it's JavaScript, CSS and HTML, and we can do everything on the server. These days, we have also people who say, let's do everything on the client, we don't need the server at all. I give you an example, it's quite funny actually, because WordPress is actually running in the browser. So the WordPress team compiled WordPress to WebAssembly. You can download it as a binary, so to speak, and use the local storage of your browser as the database. Okay. Very good for testing new features, or if you have some security concerns, you could download a website and just let it run locally if you want to. So the truth may be something, okay, that just one building block is on the server, or even more building blocks is on the server. Who cares? Just always think about state management and the complexity you get with it. So next, one block can't do it all. Everybody who tells you, come to us, we have the best ecosystem, the best whatever, we can do everything, it's not true. It will never be true. Every piece of software has its purpose, and it will never be I don't think there is no system at any point in time that will say, if you do everything with Node, you can let it run everywhere and everything is good. I think this is not possible. Don't let shiny blocks slow you down. So be careful before you unwrap something. I know it's exciting, it's funny, it's a lot of joy. I like it a lot, unwrapping stuff. But it always also produces a lot of internal conflict in myself, because I have to deal with all that stuff. And every box you don't open, you don't have to take care of. So technology is not a dogma, it's a choice. And we have to choose carefully with every project where we would like to use, or where our business logic should run in that project. You could have a very abstract language or high-level language like JavaScript, TypeScript, whatsoever. You could use PHP, Python, Go, whatever you need. But you can also go layers down and use Rust or C++ or C if you have a very specific use case that has to perform very well. So last but not least, in the last 30 years, I don't know, JavaScript was always the gatekeeper of the browser. So this was always an argument. With JavaScript, we can do everything because it runs on the server and the client. But there is some technology around the corner that might change that, and this is a might. Because with WebAssembly, you would be able to let software run on the client or the server, both. And additionally, you can write, let's say I have a practical example. So how about, and this is just the if when. Let's say we have Fusion. And Fusion, I don't say that I know how to do that, but if it would be possible to put Fusion into a WebAssembly application, it would still work the same way as it does right now within our PHP environment, but it could also potentially work then on the client side as well, because when we have WebAssembly established, and there are a few things ahead that need to be achieved to get that really working, but this is for me something I'm looking forward, that there is not one technology anymore in the browser. There are all the technologies who support it in the browser. So that might also add complexity, but also maybe solve some really, really tough problems you have. Okay, quick recap. So why do we trust in Neos? We have Fusion EFX, we have the dimension system, we have the content repository with node types, and we have the flow framework with event sourcing. And this is my personal reason why for many web projects we do, our center of gravity is Neos, and we of course use different technologies to achieve certain use cases, but basically you can really, really achieve a lot with Neos CMS. Thank you very much. My name is David Spiola. I'm from Vienna, Austria, and I'm very happy to talk about all that stuff I just was speaking about.
Thank you very much, David. Some of you already submitted some questions via the app. Thank you very much for that. Makes it much easier for me to read them out, and people on the stream can hear them. I think one you already answered. Could you see parts of Neos as WebAssembly or other front-end technology like Fusion? You just told us that
it's a big if, of course. I totally don't know how to do that, but I would really think it would be awesome. But this, yes.
And then the big one, to summarize it, when to go headless, in your opinion?
For me, the only real reason to go headless is the microservice architecture, because when you introduce a, let's say, full-featured JS or JavaScript-based framework into the mix, you have to address a lot of concerns. And there are so many cool technologies, and browser support is so good already that you can achieve a lot with things like HTMX or HTMM over the wire. So there is an operating system based on jQuery. I mean, you can do everything if you want, you know. But at the end, microservices only make sense if you have to get data, you have to send data, and this is, in my opinion, always the microservice use case.
All right. I'm very much looking forward to another talk that addresses the same topic. I saw some zebras moving their heads back there as well. So
2 talks in the audience, actually, later today.
Who's interested in more talks about headless? There will be more on that topic later. David, thank you very much for your talk today. We have a little present for all the speakers. It's a seed mix and a little Bee Hotel Neos branded. And there's a tea and honey box for you to enjoy at home. Thank you very much for being here today.
It's awesome.